to just give you a brief overview of the Women in Fisheries Network. It was first established in 1993, and the idea came from a group of development scholars, activists, fisheries scientists, gender specialists, who were very keen on advancing the interests of women in the fisheries sector. And they really wanted to connect with the women that were actually in the fishing sector, those that were in the subsistence fisheries, those in the industrial fisheries. And so we had some funding from the Canadians to start with, way back in 1993, two organizations, CUSO and ICOD, that allowed the network to be established in 1993. We were registered under the Charitable Trusts Act as a non-profit organization. And we saw our role, or three main functions that we thought we should fulfill. One was research, because we had scholars in the group. One was training, capacity building, and the third one was advocacy. So we saw our role in those three areas back in 1993. Now, some 2 decades later, we're actually still doing the same thing: research, training, advocacy. But during the period of 2003 to about 2014, during that 10-year period, it was a period of inactivity. And this was largely because many of the leading members went away for professional development. We all went for further schooling. Some passed away. And so in 2014, we regrouped, and we had some new members leading the charge and saying, you know what? There's still a very important space for the Women in Fisheries Network. So in 2014, through some generous assistance by SPC, their FAME division, Fisheries and Marine Ecosystems Division, they gave us a small grant, and they said, you can use this grant to do a scoping study of the status of women in the fishing or the fisheries sector now, in 2014. So one of our members, Ms. Alleviation, who is very well known as a gender specialist, she did the scoping study for the network to see entry points where the network could come back into the fold. So we were revived in 2014, and we've since received very generous support from the Fiji Women's Fund. They've been our main donor, but we've had some very generous support too from the Ministry of Fisheries, and it was through their generous funding that we were able to launch this very important report that you'll be hearing about later today. So we now have, we've got a board of trustees, we have an executive board, we've got 63 members that are made up of community groups, individuals, men and women that are interested in advancing the interests of women in the fisheries sector. I'd just like to hold up a publication that we published way back in 1996, Women Fishing for Answers. This has probably been the key publication that the network has published to date. We certainly intend to produce some more knowledge products, but it's interesting because this publication highlighted some of the issues that women were facing back in the 1990s. Now, 2 decades later, we've actually made some progress with some of those issues, but with some of them, they still remain the same today, 2 decades later. But that is what the Women in Fisheries Network and all our friends and members here today are wanting to address. We've actually come a long way. We've still got a long way to go, and we hope that you will accompany us on this journey to advancing the interests of women in the fisheries sector.
Dr. Mereseini, the organizers of Women in Fisheries Network Fiji, the representatives of the partners for today's workshop, ladies, it's not often that I get to stand before, what do we call them, fisherwomen? Yes, fisherwomen. And it's really good to be here this morning to look at an aspect of women in a sector where it's dominated by males, basically. I do know that there's probably more women out there being fisherwomen than men, particularly when we talk about the livelihoods of each family. But recognition of it, recognizing that aspect of women's contribution in this sector is largely unnoticed. So I'm really thankful to be here this morning, to be part of this forum on a very important aspect of our development. The fisheries industry is one of Fiji's key resource-based sectors, as we all know. The private sector has been the lead player in the fishing industry, with government providing the regulatory and resource management oversight and pursuing adherence to regional and international commitments. Government has also supported the industry in the diversification of export markets, trade facilitation, product research and development, conducive fiscal and tax environment and infrastructure. The challenge at hand is creating equal opportunities for men and women who are employed formally and informally in the industry. And certainly, an equitable environment is what needs to be created to empower and develop our women in fisheries for many clear reasons that are a hindrance to its sustainability. I convey my warm congratulations to Mr. Langi Torimbao, the consultant of the Women in Fisheries Network Fiji, for his valuable work towards the national stocktake of the institutional and enabling mechanisms that support gender in fisheries in Fiji. I am told that the need to conduct a national stocktake of the institutional and enabling mechanisms that support gender in fisheries was a key recommendation from a report conducted in 2014, looking at the status of women in fisheries in Fiji. The aim of the stocktake has been to conduct a thorough institutional mapping of the fisheries sector across key stakeholders, in particular conducting an inventory of sex disaggregated data that relates to women who directly live on, derive a livelihood and benefit from marine resources, to those who are remotely based, including urban, rural dwellers, who have a role to play in the management, the harvesting, selling and processing of marine resources in Fiji. According to the Secretariat of Pacific Communities, Women in Fisheries Bulletin, whereby findings from Ms. Vuniwaqa, I understand she's here today, the report on the role and engagement of women in fisheries in Fiji, were published. The lack of acknowledgement of women's fishing participation or of the significant contribution to the livelihoods of coastal people, in part due to the non-remuneration of their fishing activities. The lack of data and appropriate economic valuation of subsistence fisheries result in women's fishing activities not being included in most official statistics. Women's small-scale economic activities are also not seen as independent economic ventures, for in most cases, their marketing participation is viewed as part of their daily chores of meeting family needs. Also, although women contribute substantially to fisheries development and management of coastal communities, there's little data to substantiate the participation in fisheries and how it has empowered them or changed their social status. Women in Fiji, and similarly in other Pacific Island countries, are increasingly moving away from traditionally defined areas of fisheries participation and are taking on commercial and post-harvest activities and setting up small-scale businesses. We may not have adequate data to prove this at this point in time, but a common sight at any of the local municipalities and roadside markets are women engaging in seafood marketing activities, whereby they sell their products to a wide range of consumers for domestic and commercial use. However, women fishers are still expected to fulfill their traditional duties and obligations, obviously because of the lack of recognition of their trade as a form of economic activity, while having to keep up with modern market economy demands. It is therefore safe to say that the role of today's women fishers has not evolved, but rather it has expanded, and sadly it is so for women in most other professions. Concerted efforts are required to change this in order to translate this under-recognized economic activity of our women into sustainable ventures for economic development. Ladies and gentlemen, it is important to understand the gender dimensions of fisheries, as women make enormous contributions to fisheries and aquaculture supply chain that are almost unrecognized, and for anyone that is invisible, their interests, their needs, their opportunities are also not addressed. We can no longer afford to let our women fishers remain invisible, and I'm extremely happy that organizations like the Women in Fisheries Network Fiji are taking great strides in making the women fishers visible in our nation, and it is with keenness that I render the full support of my ministry to further develop this area of work. I'm told that the network has a strategic plan, 2016 to 2020, aligned with a number of key national, regional, and international policies. The plan prioritizes improving livelihoods and food security opportunities for women by capacity building, training, and mentoring, having the network recognized as a research hub of information and repository for issues relating to women in fisheries, advocating for improved policy and policy implementation for greater equality in all aspects of fisheries, and building a strong network and responsive organizational base that utilizes the diverse knowledge, skills, and experiences of its members. The Fijian government has also been taking necessary steps in strengthening this area of work for Fijian women. This is encompassed in the 25 to 20-year National Development Plan, for example. The National Gender Policy of Fiji also sets out that public service must strengthen equitable access by men and women to the factors of agricultural production, paying particular attention to the gender differences in access to and repayment of credit, and taking into consideration the disadvantaged position of the most vulnerable women in rural areas. It further requires us to recognize, for the purpose of resource allocation, the special vulnerabilities of women in relation to natural disasters and climate change, which is a real threat to the fisheries sector, and develop partnerships with development agencies to ensure gender-aware resource allocation. It's pleasing to see that the Ministry of Fisheries, in line with the requirements of the National Gender Policy, has in place a component on gender equality and women's development in its annual corporate plan for 2018. The goal of the Ministry of Fisheries had initially been for the Women in Fisheries Network Fiji, in partnership with other agencies, to establish a system of data collecting, information management, and access to services on women in fisheries activities to effectively inform policies, programs, and allocate resources towards women in fisheries and development. The aim for 2018 has been to implement effective strategies and programs to improve support, awareness raising, research and development, and services towards women fishers in line with the proposed Fiji National Fisheries Policy. It is my hope to see such strategic commitments to remain consistent and translate into better opportunities for women in the fisheries industry. To conclude, may I emphasize the need for collaborative efforts to continue until we achieve gender parity in the opportunities within the fisheries industry. Such informal economic activities are truly the backbone of our economy, and up to half of the industry being made up of women. We truly cannot limit their rights to recognition and access. We need to work together to provide solutions to the challenges faced by women to becoming rightful commercial operators in the fisheries industry in Fiji. We need to work together to let women fishers enjoy the same resources and recognition as their male counterparts. We need to work together to help policymakers and organizations working for the industry get relevant sex disaggregated data to make informed decisions and policies. There's a lot to be done, and let's keep striving. With these words, it is my great pleasure to launch a national stocktake of the institutional and enabling mechanisms that support gender in fisheries in Fiji, and declare the Women in Fisheries Forum 2018 open.